Ethan was halfway through his morning coffee when his sister, Claire, stopped mid-sentence. She just froze. Her eyes didn't blink. Her lips curved into a wide smile, but it didn't fade, even after he'd turned away to reach for the sugar. You okay?" he asked, stirring slowly. The smile remained, fixed like it had been painted on. Then, just as abruptly, she blinked. Once, twice, before continuing her story exactly where she'd left off, as if nothing had happened. But it wasn't the freezing that unsettled him most. It was the way her next sentence was word for word identical to something she'd told him last month, right down to the pause before "you know." Ethan didn't say anything, but the coffee suddenly tasted bitter. That evening, Ethan met his best friend, Mark, for drinks at their usual bar. The place was noisy, crowded, alive with chatter, yet when Ethan told a joke about their high school math teacher, Mark's laugh sounded wrong. It was perfectly timed, exactly 3 beats after the punchline, loud enough to match the bar's atmosphere, but there was no real expression in his eyes. It was like watching an actor hit a cue. Then Ethan noticed something stranger. The laugh was identical to the last time he'd told that same joke years ago. Same pitch, same inflection, same short inhale at the end. He opened his mouth to say something, but Mark was already shifting the conversation, smoothly, deliberately, to the weather, like he didn't want Ethan to ask questions. 2 nights later, Ethan went to his parents' house for dinner. The moment he walked in, his mother greeted him with the exact same phrase she'd used the week before. "There's my boy, right on time." Same intonation, same bright smile, same quick pat on the arm. He brushed it off until halfway through the meal, when his father set down his fork, leaned back, and said, "You know, the traffic's been lighter than usual lately." Ethan froze. His father had said those exact words, verbatim, at the last 3 dinners. He decided to test them. Actually, the traffic was terrible today. Both parents went perfectly still for a moment, then smiled in unison. His mother's eyes darted to his father before she said, "Well, that's unusual." The tone was warm. The pause between words was calculated. On his lunch break the next day, Ethan sat alone on a park bench, still chewing over last night's oddness, when a jogger slowed to a stop near him. The man was tall, fit, wearing a faded red hoodie. He wiped his brow, glanced at Ethan, and said cheerfully, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Something about the voice, flat but pleasant, made Ethan's stomach knot. Because just yesterday, a completely different stranger at the grocery store, short, middle-aged, wearing a floral dress, had looked him in the eye and said the exact same thing, with the exact same rhythm. He tried to shrug it off, but the jogger's smile didn't change. It didn't move. It was the same frozen expression Claire had worn in his kitchen. And then the man jogged away, not looking back, running with oddly stiff, mechanical strides. That night, Ethan lay in bed, the glow of his phone lighting the dark room. He scrolled aimlessly, trying to distract himself, when he got a text from Mark. "Hey man, just thinking about that trip we took to the lake. Good times." Before he could respond, another message popped up. The same words. Exactly the same. He frowned and typed back, "Did you mean to send that twice?" Mark replied instantly, "Send what twice?" Ethan's pulse quickened. He looked back. Only one message was there now. The duplicate was gone, as if it had never existed. But he knew what he'd seen. Somewhere in the apartment, a faint electrical hum began, low and steady, like a machine starting up. The hum followed him into sleep. Ethan woke at 3:17 a.m., throat dry, apartment silent again, except for a faint creak in the hallway. He sat up, heart pounding, and saw a shadow at the end of the corridor. "Mark?" he called, instantly regretting it. The figure didn't move. It just stood there. Slowly, it leaned forward, as if peering at him from the dark. The light from a passing car spilled briefly through the blinds, just enough for Ethan to see its face. Claire's face. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, catching the light in a way that made them look almost metallic. Then, the hallway was empty. The next morning, Ethan tried to bury himself in spreadsheets at the office, telling himself he'd imagined the hallway vision. But around 10 a.m., he heard it, his coworker Dana's laugh. Except she wasn't laughing. She sat across from him, staring at her screen, lips unmoving, yet the laugh came again. The exact same sequence of notes, like a sound clip on repeat. Dana?" he asked. She blinked, once, and then smiled at him. Too smoothly. Sorry, I was just thinking about something funny. Ethan forced a nod, but when she turned back to her computer, he caught it. Her fingers weren't moving across the keyboard. They were tapping the same 3 keys in a rhythmic loop. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Like she was keeping time to something only she could hear. That evening, Ethan stopped at the corner store for milk. As he walked in, the bell over the door jingled, and every person in the store turned to look at him at the same time. For strangers, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Their gazes didn't waver, not even a blink. The cashier finally broke the tension, smiling mechanically. Evening. The others turned back to what they were doing in the same synchronized motion, like marionettes tugged by one string. Ethan grabbed the milk, his pulse loud in his ears. But as he approached the counter, he noticed something worse. The cashier's smile was Claire's. Not just similar, identical. Same curve, same dimples, same exact flicker of teeth. And when the man handed him his change, he said, "There's my boy, right on time." Ethan barely slept that night. He kept replaying the cashier's voice in his head. It wasn't just similar to his mother's, it was exact. The next morning, he dug out an old family video from a Thanksgiving years ago. He skipped to the moment when his mom greeted him at the door. "There's my boy right on time." He froze the frame, listened again. The inflection, the pause before boy, the pitch of the final syllable. Every microscopic detail was the same as the cashier's voice. It wasn't similar. It was as if someone had copied the sound from the video and played it through different mouths. A cold thought slid through his mind. They weren't imitating. They were using something. That evening, Ethan sat in his car outside Mark's apartment, rehearsing what he'd say. He needed answers. When Mark opened the door, Claire was already inside, sitting on the couch. The TV was on, muted, casting flickering light over both of them. They turned their heads toward him at exactly the same moment. "Hey, Ethan," they said in unison. Perfectly matched pitch, perfectly matched speed. It wasn't a coincidence. He felt it in his bones. Then, as if realizing they'd done it, both laughed. The same laugh. Synchronized, every note, every breath, exactly the same. His skin crawled. Somewhere behind the wall, something mechanical clicked 3 times, then stopped. Ethan sat stiffly on the edge of Mark's couch, pretending to sip his beer while his eyes flicked between them. Claire started telling a story about a hiking trip. Halfway through, Mark jumped in, not to add details, but to repeat her words a half-second behind her, like a quiet echo. She didn't react, didn't even glance at him. Then she began again. Same story, same words, same intonation, while Mark repeated it all over again, perfectly synced. Ethan's stomach turned. They weren't talking to him. They were running a program together. When he finally stood to leave, neither of them moved to walk him out. They just smiled. Both smiles identical down to the smallest twitch at the corner of their mouths, and said, in one voice, "See you soon, Ethan." On his drive home, Ethan took a longer route through quiet residential streets, hoping the fresh air through the cracked window would calm him. At a crosswalk, an elderly woman stepped out in front of his car. She moved slowly, shuffling with a cane, eyes fixed on him. Halfway across, she froze, completely still. Ethan waited, hand hovering over the horn, when a flicker, like a skipped frame in a video, jerked her forward. She was suddenly 3 steps farther, cane mid-swing, without having taken the steps. His mouth went dry. He blinked, and she was gone. The street was empty. No alleys, no doorways. Just empty asphalt under the streetlights. When Ethan got home, his phone rang before he could even take off his coat. His mother's name lit the screen. He answered cautiously, "Hey, Mom." Silence. Then, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" The exact same tone as the jogger, the grocery store woman, the red-hoodied man. He didn't respond. After a pause, the same phrase came again, identical in pitch, speed, and breath. He hung up, hands trembling. The phone rang again instantly. Same caller ID. When he answered this time, every voice he knew, Mark, Claire, his parents, Dana, spoke at once, perfectly layered. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" And in the background, faintly, he could hear the low hum again, growing louder. Shaken, Ethan went to his bedroom and pulled out the shoebox of old photographs he kept under the bed. He spread them out on the floor, family trips, birthdays, holidays, searching for something real, something uncorrupted. In a Christmas photo from 5 years ago, Mark had his arm around him, both laughing. But as Ethan stared, the laughter on Mark's face faded. The corners of his mouth softened, straightened, until he was wearing the exact fixed smile Ethan had seen on Claire. He flipped to another photo, his parents at his graduation. Same thing, smiles aligning into the same impossible symmetry, eyes widening just slightly too far. One by one, the faces in every photo shifted, until finally, in the earliest one, a picture of him as a toddler, he saw himself smiling that same inhuman smile. Ethan stumbled into the bathroom, gripping the sink, needing to see his reflection. The light buzzed overhead as he leaned forward. At first, everything looked normal. Then he noticed it. When he tilted his head, the reflection hesitated, lagging by a fraction of a second before following. His breath quickened. He lifted his hand, and again, the image was just slightly late, like a video feed buffering. And when it finally caught up, the mouth in the mirror began to curl upward into that smile. But Ethan hadn't smiled. He stepped back sharply, heart racing. The reflection's smile held. Then its lips moved on their own, whispering, perfectly clear, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" That night, Ethan left every light in the apartment on. He sat in the living room, TV muted, trying to keep his eyes open. At 2:04 a.m., the hum returned, low, insistent, vibrating through the floor. The television flickered on by itself. No picture, just static. In the white noise, shapes began to form, shadows of people, their outlines trembling. One stepped forward until its face was almost clear. Claire. Her image jerked like a broken transmission, freezing, then skipping ahead. When her mouth moved, every voice Ethan knew poured out at once. "Ethan, come with us now." He scrambled for the remote, yanking the power cord from the wall. But the static didn't stop. It was coming from inside the room. Ethan bolted from the apartment, not even locking the door behind him. The night air was cold, sharp, but it felt cleaner than whatever was inside. He ran 3 blocks before stopping, bent over, catching his breath. That's when he realized everything was silent. No cars, no wind, no insects. He straightened slowly. The street around him was filled with people, neighbors, strangers, all standing perfectly still, their heads turned toward him in unison. Every single one of them wore the same expression, that same smile. And then, without a sound, they all lifted their right hands at the exact same time and waved. Ethan backed away, heart pounding. But as he turned the corner, the street ahead was the same. Dozens of people, shoulder to shoulder, lining the sidewalk. They were different ages, different builds, different clothes, but their postures and expressions were identical. Each head tilted slightly to the left. Each pair of eyes followed his every move. He turned again. Another street. The same formation, the same faces. It was like the entire town had become a single organism, folding around him, sealing off every escape. Somewhere deep within the line, he saw Claire. She didn't move toward him, didn't speak. She just raised one finger and pointed, slowly, deliberately, behind him. Ethan spun around. Mark was standing in the middle of the road, alone. No smile this time. Just an empty, slack expression, as if someone had forgotten to turn him on. "Mark," Ethan said cautiously. Mark's mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was Ethan's own voice, repeating words he'd spoken earlier that day. "I need to get out of here." Then his chest began to glow, a faint bluish light pulsing through the fabric of his shirt. It grew brighter, faster, until Mark's entire body flickered, revealing brief glimpses of something metallic underneath his skin. When the light snapped off, Mark smiled. And it was Claire's smile. Mark took one step toward Ethan, and at that exact moment, the entire line of people behind him began moving too, each in perfect sync, like mirrored puppets. Ethan ran. No matter which street he turned onto, they were there ahead of him, already in position, always the same distance away, closing the circle tighter and tighter. They didn't shout, didn't breathe heavily, didn't stumble. Just that steady, synchronized pace. When he glanced back, Mark was closer than he should have been, his head bobbing slightly with each step. Exactly the same bob as every other person following. It wasn't a chase. It was a program executing. Ethan burst into the open space of the park, lungs burning. For a moment, he thought he'd escaped, The lines of people had stopped at the edge, frozen again. He tilted his head back, trying to steady his breathing, and saw it. High above, the night sky had a line running through it, straight, sharp, too perfect to be a cloud. It pulsed faintly, like a seam between two pieces of fabric. And when it pulsed, the people at the park's edge twitched in unison, as if responding to a signal. He realized then, whatever they weren't watching him alone. Something else, far above that seam, was watching too. From the line of frozen figures at the park's edge, Claire stepped forward. Her movements were wrong, too smooth, like joints without resistance. Her eyes caught the park's dim lights and reflected them, silver and cold. "Ethan," she said, but her lips didn't move. The voice came from somewhere else, above, below, inside him. He backed away, but she kept pace effortlessly. "You've seen too much," she continued, the words echoing in his skull rather than his ears. Then her face glitched, just for a split second, skin turning to metal, eyes to dark, empty lenses, before snapping back. She reached out her hand. "Come with us. It's easier that way." Ethan turned to run, but the world around him stuttered. The trees, the grass, the figures at the park's edge, everything froze, then jumped forward a fraction of a second, like a corrupted video file. It happened again, and again. Each skip brought Claire closer without her moving between frames. Her hand was inches from his face now. The hum was deafening, vibrating inside his teeth. He clutched his head, but the sound wasn't in the air, it was in him. Through the blinding pressure, he heard the layered voices again. Mark, Claire, his parents, Dana, strangers. All speaking as one. It's time to come home. The ground beneath Ethan's feet began to ripple, not like water, but like a screen distorting under pressure. Each step felt heavier, as if invisible hands were dragging him backward. He looked up at the seam in the sky. It was splitting open now, light pouring through in long, blinding beams. Within the light, shapes moved. Tall, thin, insect-like silhouettes, their heads crowned with rows of reflective eyes. The hum rose to a pitch that made his vision blur. The frozen crowd began to melt, their human forms dissolving into jagged, metallic frames. Claire, if it was still Claire, stood before him, arm outstretched, the skin on her hand peeling away to reveal a chrome claw. The light from above widened, locking onto him like a spotlight, and his body started moving toward it, without his consent. Ethan's feet left the ground. The light from the seam wrapped around him, pulling him upward as the metal forms below watched in perfect stillness. His mind screamed to fight, but his body obeyed something else, something ancient, buried deep inside. As he rose higher, the hum became words, clear and undeniable. "Your cycle is complete. The simulation is closing." The light grew blinding, erasing the park, the town, the faces. And then, he saw himself. Dozens, hundreds of Ethans, all suspended in beams of light, all wearing the same frozen smile. The truth hit like ice in his veins. They weren't replacing him. They were retrieving him. And this was his return.